I've decided going forward that we're going to focus this channel back on things political. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I won't occasionally from time to time do things other than political on this channel. I still might here and there, maybe some future movie TV reviews as I, desire and some other random videos, but I've decided to refocus this channel on political things, specifically my moderate platform, my moderate opinions. So that is the direction I'm going to be taking GB Fang going forward. Not exactly going back to the channel's origin, because the channel started off as a constitutionalist, libertarian themed political channel. I'm still a constitutionalist, but I'm also a moderate these days. So I'm more moderate. And some of you have known that for quite a while now. And I just feel like it's time for me to get my opinions out there, my views, my thoughts, and how I would be when it comes to the platform if I hypothetically had a moderate platform, which can be difficult depending on what side you're on, because somebody that's on for example, the right, a Republican moderate might share some opinions with a Democrat moderate, but they may not be like 100% the same thing. My goal for the longest time has been to try to get us all back to the to middle. I realize not everybody's in the middle. I realize there are people that are on the right and people on the left and everywhere which between. And then, of course, there's the far right, there's the far left. But I think that the majority of people actually want to get along and compromise and come up with solutions to problems that we all face as a society. And going forward, my plan is to work on and put together a moderate platform series about how I stand on specific issues. And yeah, it'll be a series. I will probably start working on it sometime in September. But for now, I want to talk about the road ahead when it comes to the 2022 elections and the 2024 presidential election. Neither one of them I'm very excited for. I'm just not very optimistic at all when it comes to what we have coming up in November. And I don't really like most of the prospects when it comes to president 2024. And I realize we're still early off from who's going to be running for president, whether or not Biden's going to run for re-election or else he's going to step aside, resign, and Kamala Harris will become president between now and 2024, and then she'll run for president in 2024. Or if the Democrats have somebody entirely different by then. And on the other side, will Trump try to run for president again, despite issues that he's obviously facing? The January 6th committee, the most recent FBI raid to his mansion in Florida, and other issues that Trump happens to be facing. Or will it be Governor Ron DeSantis, also of Florida? Or will it be somebody else entirely that rises up through the ranks on the Republican side to end up becoming the presidential nominee? Maybe it'll be Liz Cheney. She just lost her congressional primary seat in Wyoming. Will she end up running for president on the Republican ticket in 2024? Or will she run as a Democrat or as an independent? Who knows, right? So right now it's kind of foggy where we're going to be in 2 years from now when it comes to the presidential election. I'm not exactly optimistic about it, but to be fair, I haven't been for a very, very long time. You look back at 2020, I wasn't excited about Trump being reelected or Biden. I didn't really want either one of those as a presidential option, but I, kind of had to hold my nose and go and vote on election day. I stood there in line for like 2 hours waiting to vote, and I kind of regret doing it. I kind of wish I would have just not bothered, even though I do believe that we should vote as a society, that in order to keep your democracy, you should participate in elections, not just the big elections like the presidential elections or the elections every 2 years federally for Congress, as well as some senatorial elections, but at the local and state level as well. I think it's vital as citizens of a country that's lucky enough to have the right to vote in a democracy like some of our countries have, including the United States, that every citizen should exercise their right to vote. And they should educate themselves about who's running and who's the best choice and go vote for that candidate. But unfortunately, a lot of people in my country don't vote. They don't take advantage of that right. And maybe they're smarter than me. Maybe they've come to realize that it's a waste of time because most of the elections end up having scumbags that end up getting elected to office, and the good candidates that were on the ballot all too often get the least amount of votes, or they don't make it past the primary for the political parties, whether it's a Republican, Democrat, etc. So, yeah, I'm not exactly excited about 2022's upcoming elections, and I'm even less excited about 2024. Now, I will throw out some predictions. For one thing, I believe that Biden will most likely not run for re-election. I don't know if he'll end up having to resign between now and then. There is a clause in one of the amendments, I think it's the presidential term limit, where the president obviously can only serve 2 terms, whether they're back-to-back or in separate terms. I think Cleveland did that, but that was prior to presidential term limits. We didn't get presidential term limits until FDR passed away, and he served for 4 presidential term limits. Well, he didn't have term limits except for the Grim Reaper, I suppose. But after that, then Congress decided that, yeah, I think that the president should only serve up to 2 terms. But there is an exception. If a sitting president leaves office within the halfway point of their presidency, then the vice president becomes president, and they don't technically run for re-election in the next election. They're running 4 elections. So they've already served president for 2 years when they run for election. And theoretically, they can serve up to 10 years as president. It's a little clause in the amendment. So theoretically, Kamala Harris could end up being president for 10 years. Now, look, I don't have any faith in Kamala Harris, nor do I have any in Biden, nor did I have any in Trump. So, yeah, I don't have much faith in most of our presidents as of late. I think somebody in my Discord was asking, who's been your favorite president over the past 50 years? And I'm going to be honest, I don't really have one. I guess Reagan was okay compared to what we've had in recent years. But that's up to, everyone's personal opinion. Some people like this president or that president. Do I think that Trump was our worst president ever? No. But I don't think he was a great president either. For one thing, he didn't act very presidential. And when you assume the role of presidency, and I think I've talked about this over the past few years, you have to become more presidential. You have to become diplomatic. You have to speak to the people as their president, not just the Republicans' president, but also the president of America, of the United States, of all the people. Doesn't matter if they voted for you or not. Because there's a very real possibility if you do a good job, somebody that didn't vote for you might actually vote for you 4 years later. They may be like, you know what, I didn't vote for him or her in the previous election, but I was impressed with their first term. And you know what? I'm going to vote for him this time. I want them reelected. You can also get the opposite, where somebody did vote for you, but 2 or 4 years later, depending on the office that you happen to be running or serving under, whether it's local, state, federal, as a city councilman or a mayor or a member of Congress or a senator, senators every 6 years, but president every 4 years. And you could lose a voter depending on how bad you do. So it can go either way when it comes to serving as an elected official. So you want to try and keep your constituents happy, even those that didn't vote for you, because you never know. The ones that didn't vote for you in the previous election may actually vote for you in the following election, along with the majority of those that voted for you to begin with. So that's definitely something that you should consider when running for office, even though a lot of times it may feel like a waste of time to even bother running, and that's why I haven't done so. There are plenty of times over the past few years where I've thought about running at a local level, but it goes back to the two-party puppet shows I've talked about many times. It's a duopoly system. I mean, yes, there are good Republicans, there are good Democrats, But the majority of both parties are scumbags. They're greedy, they're corrupt, they're out of touch with the population, with the voters, with the people, and they only really care about themselves and maybe their family, maybe those that are closest to them, and their own self-interest in keeping their campaign war chests funded by all the different special interest groups, whether it's lobbyists or big pharma, like the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, the banks, the healthcare, complex, big healthcare. Like I think I mentioned big pharma, like all the different industries. They make billions upon billions of dollars. All these corporations obviously put money towards this candidate or that candidate in the hopes that this candidate or that candidate will support them on the congressional, senatorial floor and pass laws or stop laws that hinder these companies. If it's a law that's going to help these companies, then obviously these elected officials are going to do what they can to help push laws to help these big corporations that help fuel their campaigns and put money into their treasury. That's just a sad reality. I mean, they do get donations from the average voter, the average citizen, but all too often it feels like most of them are out of touch with the voters because they're supposed to represent us, the people, the citizen, the taxpayer. That's the way it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, a lot of them don't exactly function that way. They go out of their way to listen to those, above the corporations, the lobbyists, and they do what they tell them to do. And most of the time they ignore what we tell them to do, even though like they're supposed to be our employees. We're supposed to be the boss. We, the people, not the other way around. But a lot of our elected officials, especially the career politicians that have been there for like 20, 30, 40, some even 50 plus years, they act like they're our bosses. Like they lord over us. Like, oh, well, I'm doing what's in your best interest. What I do is for you, even if most of you don't approve of what I'm voting for or the bills I'm passing into law. It's a sad reality that we live in, and that should not be the case. And I'm completely against career politicians. That's why for the longest time, I have been promoting congressional term limits. And that's something my grandfather and I agree on. And, he's the one who got me interested in politics from an early age. He's conservative. And I'm more moderate now, but there was a time when I leaned more conservative. Then I went from conservative to libertarian to now moderate. And speaking of my papaw, the reason why I'm flying this Bonanza V-Wing is because it's new in the Microsoft Flight Sim shop. And this was one of my papaw's planes that we used to fly around in back in the day. So I have some fond memories of flying around in my grandfather's Bonanza V-Wing. And it's a beautiful plane. Small, yet it gets the job done. And when I saw online that it was being promoted through the Microsoft Store for Flight Sim, I knew I was going to have to pick it up. And it has a very good rating right now. I think the rating is 4.7. And a lot of people have spoken very highly about the Bonanza V-Wing. It wasn't the same colors as this plane. And I do like the fact that it says GB, I didn't put it there. That's just the call letters the call sign that came with the plane. So I think it works out. It was meant to be like GB because, me, GB, right? Anyways, I don't even know if the video synced with the audio. I'll try to sync it properly. But anyways, so I just thought about my papaw whenever I bought this plane. I'll probably send him some photos of it. In fact, before I started recording, the game crashed when I was in the showcase on the runway. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You actually crashed while I was just trying to take some photos of the Bonanza? Seriously, game? Okay, so let's just go back to what we were talking about. I know that was off topic for a moment, but yeah, so my political views have skewed over the years. As I've gotten older, I've developed my own political thoughts, views, ideas, and I think that's healthy. I think that's something we should all do. You should all be willing to look at different points of view and ask yourself, do you really believe in this or really believe in that? And that helps define who you are politically, whether you're on the right or on the left or in the middle like me. And the main reason why I'm in the middle is because I'm tired of the divisiveness that's been going on for far too long now in my country. And for those of you that do watch my political videos, you know this. I've been talking about this for years. So, yeah, I'm tired of career politicians. I want term limits. I want a mandatory retirement age. I made a video about it a few months ago because there was a congressman in Alaska, right, that died in his 80s. And he had served in that seat for many, many, many years. And he was actually running for re-election at the time he died. You're in your 80s, dude. Come on. This is ridiculous. And we have a lot of people on Congress that are in their 60s, 70s, and I think there's even a few also in their 80s. No. I'm sorry, but you've been in Congress too freaking long. You're out of touch with the people. It's time to retire. It's time for congressional term limits. I'm glad that there's more people talking about congressional term limits. And I think there's also more people talking about mandatory retirement age for members of our Congress, the House, the Senate. I would even go as far as the presidency because of the fact that we've had some old guys in office. Okay, look, when you're older, obviously you're wiser. At least I would like to believe you're wiser. You've been around the block a few years, a few decades. You've learned from your mistakes. You've gained knowledge, and you're a better person because of it. So I don't mind people that are older serving in an election capacity, as an elected official, whether it's a local office, state, or at the federal level. But you're supposed to be a public servant. You're supposed to serve the people. And I don't think the founders intended on you to make a career out of being in office, especially at the federal level in Washington. And that's why I'm a proponent of limiting Congress to term limits. I think it was 4 terms for the House, 8 years for House members. You could serve up to 4 terms, which is 2 years a pop. And then it was 2 terms I proposed for Senate, which would be 12 years. That would mean that the most you could serve was 20 years. Now, yeah, that may seem like a long time, but that's way better than 30, 40, 50 years, which is unfortunately a huge problem that we've had for many, many decades now when it comes to the United States Congress. And there's a reason why the approval levels of Congress are always below average at best, if not lower. It's because the majority of the American people see Congress as a bunch of scumbags, corrupt, incompetent, out of touch, but somehow they keep getting reelected over and over again. And what is their response to term limits? I even asked a former congressman in my area at one time, because I was trying to propose this over a decade ago, and I asked him directly. I even gave him a sheet of paper with my idea. Here's me thinking that this would actually, lead to something. Silly me. To be young again, right? And I even made the case to him, at a meeting, telling him why I think that we should have congressional term limits. And a few other people even inquired about it as well. And he jokingly responded well, you have congressional term limits. You can vote me out of office. Well, we never voted you out of office. The only reason why he left office is because he chose not to run for re-election. And that's true most of the time. Unless they do something really, really, really bad. Then they get voted out of office. But all too often, the reason why they end up leaving office is because they either choose to, they resign, or they decide not to run for re-election, or they end up dying in office like that guy in Alaska. So no, I'm sorry. I think we need more restrictions when it comes to people running for Congress. I think that we need to make sure they can actually recite the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights. Okay, so the Constitution, I will admit, I cannot sit here and tell you everything that's in the Constitution. It's the I guess the ground level, the foundation for the founding document of our republic. But that's why the founders, eventually gave us the Bill of Rights, and on top of the Bill of Rights, we have amendments, so we can amend the Constitution whenever there's things that happened in the past that we no longer approve of. For example, there was a time in the late 1700s, 1787, which is where my flag company came from. We'll talk about that company another time. Some of you probably are aware of it. But I've had a few small businesses that didn't exactly pan out. Live and learn. But 1787, that's when we got the United States Constitution. I think it was 1791, we got the Bill of Rights to go with the Constitution. And from there, over the past several decades, and we got various amendments. Unfortunately, at the passage of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, we still had slavery. We still had inequality when it came to women. They didn't have voting rights. They were not seen as citizens. And African American ancestors definitely weren't seen as citizens. But through the passage of amendments, we were able to change things for the better. We were able to end slavery with the amendments, not just the Civil War, but it was also amendments that abolished slavery in the United States, that gave men of all races, even though I consider us all to be part of the human race, but it gave all men citizenship, voting rights, and eventually women's suffrage, which did the same thing for women. And there have been other amendments that have passed as well. So, yeah, I do believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the amendments, and I think that's the right way to go about making change in the country, because we're not perfect. We never will be. But I do feel like that we have come a long ways since the founding of our nation after the end of the American Revolution, where, yeah, not everybody had freedom and liberty, justice and equality, but a lot more people have it now than we did at the nation's founding. So it was always this aspiration for freedom, liberty, justice for all. And yeah, we still have a ways to go. But I feel like we've been on the right path for a very long time now. We've come a long way since the civil rights movements and since the gay rights movements back in the 90s. But once again, there's always room for improvement. We can always do better. But when it comes to our elected officials, we could also do better by voting most of them out on election day. Sadly, the majority of them will not be voted out. I mean, Wyoming was like a freak example of sometimes an incumbent being voted out, because basically she kind of sort of was in the primary. Now, there is speculation she may run as an independent. I don't know if she will. I don't know if she's going to run. I don't know if she's going to run as a Democrat, because I think there's already a Democrat congressional candidate for election day. And I don't even know if Liz Cheney has time to even sign up to run as an independent by election day. Who knows? I mean, I have my own mixed views and opinions about Liz Cheney as well. I mean, well, let's not talk about her dad, because look, I don't believe in judging somebody based on their parents or their grandparents or their ancestors. I believe that we all deserve that opportunity to be judged based upon our own merits and our own deeds. So with whatever issues I may have with her dad, former Vice President Cheney, and maybe there were some things that I agree with him on, there's also a lot of things I disagree with him on. I'm not going to demonize her because of that. And I think that's fair. Now, obviously, there will be children and grandchildren of previous elected officials and presidents, senators, congresspeople that may mostly share the opinions of their parents or grandparents. That happens as well. But there's also some that wish to go their own way and do their own thing. And I think that's important. It goes back to my papa and me. You know, he's conservative. I'm not conservative. I'm moderate. But there's still things I agree with my grandfather on, but there's also things I disagree with him on. But I still love my papa, and I'm not out to cancel him because he and I happen to disagree on some things. And I think that's what we need to get back to. Back to some dialogue between all sides, to stop demonizing each other based off of whether or not you're on the far right or the far left. And unfortunately, it's the far left and the far right that causes most of our problems, because they're so hell-bent on their own platform that their platform is right and that the other side is wrong. And so they're willing to go to the extremes in order to try and justify their beliefs, when I think that most people reside somewhere in the middle. It's just that they feel like, and I speak from personal experience, that we have nowhere to go. The fact that the right has moved further to the right and the left has moved further to the left. And moderates often find themselves like outsiders within their own parties, because there were more Republican moderates back in the day. There were more moderate Democrats back in the day, which helped bridge the gap between the two parties when it came to important issues that they actually had to sit down and work on. Like the past few laws that have passed have been very divisive laws, and it came down to like a vote of 51 to 50 in the Senate, and the 51 vote was because of the vice president, who's also the president of the Senate. So she was able to go in and cast the deciding vote. It's unfortunate that we have that. And I really wish when it came to these laws that we saw, yes, a majority vote prevail, but it shows that both sides to some degree are not willing to sit down and actually talk. I mean, maybe some of them are, but I think the majority of, for example, Democrats in Senate, we're just going to stick with the Senate for the moment, are hell-bent on their own, making sure their own agenda is pushed without giving an inch. On the flip side, I feel like the majority of the Republicans in Senate do the same thing. They want their agenda pushed, and they're not willing to give an inch either. The problem with that is our body, the Congress, our government is supposed to be different sides coming together from different walks of life and different political backgrounds in order to hammer out solutions. To say, okay, well, I'm this, you're that, we disagree on this, this, and this, but what do we agree on? How can we get at the middle, at the table, and hammer out some sort of solution to the problems that we face? And I think that's a problem that our Congress is getting wrong with each passing election cycle, whether it's the House or the Senate. So yeah, these laws are passed and Biden is applauded. Whether or not Biden's actually, at home upstairs anymore, I don't know. I know it's a running joke. I feel like the truth is somewhere in the middle, and the truth can always be found somewhere in the middle, more of a gray area. Not always, but most of the time. I think that Biden is there, but it's obvious that he has some mental health issues. Maybe not as serious as, some, would claim, but it doesn't help whenever he goes on TV giving speeches and doing interviews, and you can tell that he's struggling here and there. I think that should be another issue when it comes to our elected officials, whether it's the president, Congress, Senate, all the way to the state and local level. I think that along with making sure they have a basic understanding of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, the amendments, and not only swearing to uphold and defend the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the amendments of the United States, but understanding them. They should also be able to pass physical health, mental checks to make sure they are of the sound body and mind and health in order to be president, in order to be a member of Congress or serve at a state level or the local level. Because you want somebody that is checking those boxes. You don't want somebody that has mental issues, because unfortunately we've had leaders in previous countries that had some clearly mental issues like paranoia. A few dictators have had that problem, and like others have had some other problems here and there. And unfortunately, usually ends to war and tyranny and genocide. I don't think I need to cite any specific examples. I think most of you could probably easily cite some examples yourself in the comments section. So you want to have our elected officials being the best of the best, not the worst of the worst, not the scum of the scum. I don't want the bottom of the barrel. I want the best minds, the best people in our offices, because that's what we as the people deserve. But when it comes to what we end up getting, a lot of the problem is the political game that is played, because we have this game that I've talked about for many years where it's my team versus your team. It's a team mentality issue where you have people that are hardcore Republican will always vote Republican no matter what, even if they have the worst people running for office. And this is true for the Democrats as well. So don't think I'm just bashing Republicans here. It's both sides, and that's where I am. I'm in the middle. I'm a moderate. So yeah, neither side is safe from criticism from me. And yeah, there are good Democrats out there. There are good Republicans out there. But the problem is when you go into that booth on election day and you don't have any idea about any of these candidates that you're voting for. And yeah, on certain election days, there's a lot of people running for office. You have a lot of people running at the local level, the state level, the federal level. And so you're not going to know everything about every one of these candidates. And so it's easier for the average voter that's aligned with a political party, be it Republican, Democrat, or even one of the third parties, to just simply go in and vote all Republican or vote all Democrat. It doesn't matter if those might be some of the worst people in the world. Criminals, thieves, liars. Well, most politicians are liars, unfortunately, or worse. People that have committed other sorts of awful crimes and deeds and have gotten away with it. Some of the worst people could be on the ballot, and they'll vote for them if they happen to have a D by their name or an R by their name. That nonsense has got to stop. We have to get back to vetting people on a person-to-person basis. Look past the D. Look past the R. Look at the person running. And look at their platform. Look where they stand on the issues. And ask yourself, is this the right person that I want representing me at the local level or at the state level or at the federal level? But all too often, we don't do that because it's so much easier to simply go in and vote Republican or go in and vote Democrat. Even though most of the time it feels like the worst choices end up making it past the primary. And that's what we end up getting on election day. Instead, it should be the opposite. We should end up with the best options. Like the worst should be flushed out at the primaries. Like, oh, these candidates are horrible. Well, we're not voting for them. No way. This is the best candidate. I'm voting for the best candidate in the primary. And there's a lot of people that don't even bother voting in the primary. They just wait till the actual election day. And then they wonder, why do I have such a crappy choice? But then there's people like me that put forth effort in the past to try and vote for good people. And all too often, I know this from personal experience, they don't win. Whether it's, once again, an election at the local, state, federal level. And it's sad because I think there are people that run for office at all levels that generally want to make a difference. And only a fraction of those people actually eventually get elected. And the majority are, at the end of the day, they talk a good talk. They may have some charm. They may have some charisma or connections, or maybe they come from wealthy families and they just know the right people to help get them in office, or they happen to have that last name, right? And they get in. And maybe a more worthy candidate didn't get enough votes because they didn't have enough money to campaign, because campaigning is expensive as hell. It is expensive as hell to run for office. Even at the local level, it's cheap compared to, say, a congressional or senatorial run. Nowhere near the cost for a legitimate presidential run, but it can still get pricey. I've looked at the numbers. I've crunched them because, like I mentioned, I've thought about running for city council a few times, or Cattle Parish Commission, because we have parishes here in Louisiana. Whereas, other parts of the country have counties, and parish, county, same thing. Louisiana French history, okay? And I'm a child of two states, in case you're wondering why I was in Texas a moment ago, flying all the way to Louisiana. Because, my small hometown back in East Texas, all the way to my current town, where I guess I consider this my actual town, in case some of you were wondering where I live. You know where I live. Oh, no, I'm scared. But yeah, honestly, I just don't know if I have it in me to even run for office now, because that's the problem. Because if I ran for office, which political party do I go into? Do I run as a Republican? Even if there's things that the Republicans stand for that I'm totally against? Do I run for a Democrat? No, I can't, because I have the same issue with the Democrats I have with the Republicans. Because there's platforms that the Democrats have and platforms that the Republicans have that I don't believe in, that I can't stand by. So I find myself in the middle without a party. And yeah, I was once a libertarian, and I have friends that are libertarians still. And I was once part of this regional libertarian party. In fact, I was the chair of the regional party years ago. But I started developing a crisis of political conscience when I started realizing that my opinions, my views were no longer as libertarian as I once thought they were. And that's why I resigned as chair of my local libertarian party many years ago, because I realized that they were not getting the proper representation from their leader that they deserved, because the head of the Libertarian Party in this region was not libertarian anymore. I wasn't going to live a lie. I wasn't going to sit around getting into arguments or debates with fellow libertarians when they were still clearly libertarian and I was no longer libertarian. So I did the right thing and I stepped aside. But the problem is stepping aside to what? Because there is no moderate party anymore. The Republicans are conservative for the most part. The Democrats are liberal, progressive. And yeah, to be fair, there are definitely Republicans that are sadly theocratic in nature, which is very scary. I mean, both sides are scary to their extremes. The extreme right is scary because of religious extremism, theocracy. And then the far left is scary because of socialism, communism. So neither side sounds appealing to me. Somebody that just wants, a functional, responsible, transparent, democratic republic, which is what we're supposed to have, by the people and for the people of the United States, where the amendments are respected and protected, including the First Amendment, the right to freedom of speech, to peacefully assemble, the freedom of religion, to believe and not believe whatever you want. I don't care what my elected officials' religious beliefs happen to be. I don't care if they're Christian. I don't care if they're Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or atheist or agnostic. I just don't want them to push their religious beliefs on me. But at the same time, I don't want religion wiped out. So even if I identify as agnostic who believes in reincarnation, I respect everyone else's beliefs, the right to believe or not to believe. And it's supposed to be protected under the First Amendment. And yeah, I believe in the right to peacefully protest, but I'm against, other types of protests that involve violence, or burning down businesses, or attacking people, or threatening people. That's when you lose the plot with me, is when you go from being peaceful protesters to using violence to various degrees. So I'm against that. I'm pro women's rights and pro gay rights and pro equality for everybody, for all Americans. I believe we all have a right to be here. And when it comes to these issues going forward, I intend to make a series of videos from a moderate point of view. Well, this moderate's point of view. Now, maybe, somebody on the right or the left may disagree with my point of view as a moderate, but at the moment, we don't exactly have a moderate party. There are a few smaller state moderate parties throughout the country, but they're very small. But we don't exactly have a national moderate party. Unfortunately, maybe one day we will. I think that's one of the issues that we have, is that we have a duopoly. We have the two-party puppet show in my country, and there needs to be a legitimate third party. The other third parties never accomplish anything at all. The Libertarian Party has been around since the early 70s. How many congressional seats do they have right now? 0. I think they may have had 1, because there was a Republican who switched to Libertarian for the rest of their term, and then they didn't run for re-election. So, yeah, that's my issue, is that the big reason why I'm personally against political parties is because I feel like they're too divisive now, and people don't stop to think about who they're voting for. Because, like I said, there are good people that run as Republicans. There are good people that run as Democrats. But there's also the rest of them. And we need less of them. And we need less we need less career politicians. And we need more people that actually care about the people and are willing to sit down with people across the aisle and hammer out their views and opinions. So that's what I would like to see going forward. Whether or not I actually manage to land the plane, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I want a third party, a moderate party, because I feel like if there was a third political party that maybe it didn't have the majority of seats in the House or Senate, but maybe it had just enough House seats and enough seats in the Senate, it could actually make a difference, because the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, when it came to bills, would have no choice but to work with the moderate party. They would have to be like, okay, well, let's work with you in order to get enough votes to pass things, which would force the Republican Party and the Democrat Party to compromise on issues that concern and affect us all. And that's the way it should be. Now, maybe one day there will be a moderate party. I don't know what it would be called. Would it just be called moderate party, or we come up with something cooler? I've actually tried to brainstorm some name ideas for the moderate party, but so far I haven't come up with anything. Oh shit. Well, looks like the plane's going down. And when I say I believe in gay rights, I mean LGBTQ rights, obviously. Everyone's rights. Equality for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're straight, bi, gay, lesbian, trans. I believe that we're all human beings and we all deserve the right to be here and live our lives. As long as you're not harming somebody else in the process, you do you. That's my philosophy. As long as the underage or animals are not involved, I generally believe in equality, freedom, liberty, justice for all. It doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, a trans. Doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. Doesn't matter what your political philosophy is. Doesn't matter what your religious beliefs happen to be or not be. Doesn't matter what your pigment happens to be. I believe that we're all human beings and we all deserve equal rights, freedoms, liberties, and justice for all. Anyways, your thoughts, your views, and opinions regarding politics in general. Is there anybody you're actually thinking about voting for in 2022, 2024? Or do you feel about the same as I do? You're kind of sick and tired of most of the so-called candidates for president and just wish we had some better options, some people that actually might unify the country. And when it comes to my future plans for a moderate themed platform series, which topic or topics would you like to see me cover in my future moderate series? Because I'm going to do it platform by platform. I would love to see suggestions from those of you that enjoy my political content and would like to see my takes about this subject, that topic, from the point of view of a moderate like me. Feel free and let me know below in the comments section.